In this market outlook video, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin US dollar on the 4 hour, so the lower time frame, looking at the S&P 500 specifically to see whether we are entering a bear market or not, looking at the US dollar index, the DXY. And then last but not least, we're going to be looking at a potential low signal that would confirm that Bitcoin actually formed the low and we can anticipate more price action to the upside. Essentially, this would be the 3 weeks up setup that's going to follow at the very end of the video. If you haven't yet, make sure to check out my free Telegram channel, MatsTA, where I share my thoughts and potential trade setups. We've been doing very well. I've started this channel last week with multiple long setups. I'm going to explain these also in the video. So yeah, make sure to click the link in the video descriptions, because I can't be posting videos 24/7, but I can share my thoughts and my insights in this channel pretty much 24/7. Into trading view, what are we looking at? We're looking at the S&P 500 Emini futures. And currently we are forming, we're looking at the 4 hour time frame, by the way, we're forming these higher highs and higher lows. This is our next leg up. So this is the current range from the higher low to the higher high. What I have marked up is the 50% level of exactly this range. We also have the VWAP anchored directly at the low. And we also have new week opening gaps in this weekly bearish value gap. I will get more into the details of all of that shortly. What's most important is essentially futures are closed from Friday all the way until Sunday, New York local time. So essentially those markets, traditional markets, are closed over the weekend. And usually what happens then is it's creating new week opening gaps. Let's keep it simple. And usually these gaps are filled in nicely. So right here we closed, that was last week, we closed right here, and then we open up down here, and those are usually filled in. So we can see, for example, right here, when we opened on Sunday 6 p.m. New York local time, when the markets opened up again, we tested it a little bit, but then we immediately started to go lower, slowly bottom out here, and then start our new wave of higher highs and higher lows, the thing I've just mentioned essentially. And eventually we ended up filling in this entire new week opening gap with this wick right here, and eventually we also pushed through it. The reason I'm mentioning this is specifically because we have this unfilled gap right here. Let me get rid of a few of these lines right there. So this is the unfilled new week opening gap here in purple. I've also labeled that out. And that's most likely the reason why we are rejecting here. The market doesn't like to leave these inefficiencies behind. And we've had a very strong impulse here of this, well, let's call it double bottom low right here. Looks like a W formation. Usually on the W formation, we're coming from the upside, forming our first low, then we're forming the middle, second low, and we continue higher. That's it's called a W, looks like a W. But yeah, right now we're currently most likely aiming to retrace into a discount of the current trading range. Once again, this low to this high. Also, it's not really surprising if we zoom out a little bit and go to a higher time frame why we're actually rejecting here. If we look at the all-time high to the March 13th low right here that we formed, we actually did touch the 50% level right here, almost to the tick. That's like perfect price delivery. And boom, we start rejecting. We're filling in this daily bullish fair value gap. We're tapping the VWAP that we just mentioned from the 4 hour time frame. So we're in the process of retracing. If we would look at the golden ratio level, the 0.618, that would come in at 5,722 to eventually fill in this new week opening gap. And if we zoom out further to the weekly time frame, I've mentioned this several times. Let me just get rid of all these drawings. If we go to the weekly time frame now, I've mentioned this several times that this is a scary side to look at with the weekly market structure shift, where we really started to move from higher highs and higher lows being formed to a lower low. So this is what we call a break-in structure. We kept on forming these higher highs, higher lows. We can see how those were squeezed together very tightly. And then we shifted market structure, forming a new lower low. So the question is this an actual market structure shift? And after that lower low, we're now starting to see a new lower high being formed. And after that lower high, most likely a new lower low will follow, and we enter bearish market structure, a new lower high, a new lower low, lower high, lower low, essentially until, well, really the bear market or the overall larger correction essentially is over. Of course, we don't want that, so we're still watching and hoping that we are seeing something like we've done right here, where we very quickly here recovered. Pretty much we're down, I think, 11% from the all-time high, and we're inside this overall market structure shift area paired with this weekly bearish share value gap. We did tap the 50% level, so like I annotated here, we don't want to see a potential lower high being formed in this area, which would confirm the weekly bearish market structure shift. Once we close above the 61.8, I would be thoroughly convinced that we are going to see new all-time highs on the S&P 500 futures contract. So for now, we're fine. Like I just mentioned, we've been forming these higher highs and higher lows, so I'm not really concerned. This is the market structure break level right here. Higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. So right now we're perfectly fine if we fill in this new week opening gap right here, because we would just end up forming our higher low and most likely continue into our next higher high and move towards the 6,000 point level again. So this is the overall outlook once we see closes below the 61.8 here, and essentially this unfilled new week opening gap, we can start getting concerned. And then it's more likely, if we, for example, break all the way down till here, that we retrace, fill in inefficiencies, and form some sort of a left shoulder, head, right shoulder reversal setup, and continue lower. And then most likely what we're going to see on the daily and the weekly is this that turns essentially into the lower high, and we continue lower and enter a bear market. The reason I'm bringing this up is because that essentially is what happened last time when we entered a bear market. We had this market structure shift right here. Higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, and we broke, formed our lower low, lower high, lower low. Here we actually did form a higher high, but we just ended up trapping bulls at the end of the bull market here, essentially get as many bulls as possible into long positions, so yeah, shorts can benefit essentially, and enter the bear market. To compare this to Bitcoin, that's going to be one of the main topics that we're going to be talking about. We saw the first Bitcoin top right here, and Bitcoin actually ended up making another higher high, while the S&P 500 didn't. But overall, I think we've been in a, if we zoom out here, we've been in a bull cycle. It's hard to deny. I mean, if we look at the lows like here, like this, it's hard to deny and say we haven't been in a bull market for stocks and all that sort of stuff. You would be delusional. We passed all-time highs multiple times. The question is, what are we going to see here? Are we actually going to start retrace and form our lower high, or are we going to reverse and this ends up being a fake out essentially? So that's the overall outlook on the S&P 500. As I'm recording this video, we keep on breaking below the VWAP here, about to test the 50% level in the 61.8. We just want to make sure we actually end up holding support there. Otherwise, it would be rather concerning in my opinion. If we look at the DXY is currently moving back up again, which is to be expected after such a huge inefficiency that has been left behind right here. And with inefficiency, I mean a fair value gap from this candle's low to this candle's high. You can see there hasn't been much trading happening, And usually when we leave gaps like this behind, for example, right here, we do come back and fill them in. Come back, fill them in, and continue the journey until we close below those, and then that's essentially your support and resistance. So we broke below the 50% level of this overall expansion right here. This is the 50%, right around 105 on the DXY. We tested 103 almost. So looking for a retracement now of this new range right here. 50% level would come in right there. That would not be ideal and would probably cause a larger correction on the overall stock market and also on Bitcoin, but doesn't necessarily have to. Overall, what we want to see is a retest of that 50% level of the overall range to the upside and the continuation lower, but this is still to be observed. If we break it down, for example, to lower time frames, we've seen this, well, let's call it a low formation. We took out those lows over here. We had three very large candles to the downside. That's very easy to see here. Then we started to slowly bottom out, and eventually just now we started to shift market structure. We're coming from the upside, forming our first low, our middle, and our second low, and now we're moving back up. This is your W formation at the low. That's what's happening on the daily, and that's why we're filling in this inefficiency, which was to be expected before we continue lower. Now, if we continue over to Bitcoin, this is what we're currently looking at. At this point in time, if we compare it to the S&P, we're holding up much, much better. I mean, in terms of the weekly range, if we look at Monday's low to the high, we're already way past the 61.8. And if we compare that to Bitcoin, the week started right about right about here. I mean, we're also below it, but we haven't broken below this low just yet. And overall, I looked at Bitcoin on the 4-hour time frame. We're right inside this range high to range low. This is our lower low, lower high, and our new lower low. Question is, okay, what's going to happen with this wedge? Are we going to break lower, retest it, and continue to take out more of the sell side liquidity and eventually continue below the range low? This would be the case if the S&P 500 fails to hold support here and also continues lower based on the weekly lower high bearish market structure shift setup. That would be the bearish case. And the bullish case is we hold support within this wedge, break above, and start attacking and working our way back to the upside into the range highs. But in my opinion, that's because Bitcoin has become a very institutional asset throughout this cycle, that it's going to follow the S&P 500 more closely. That's why I'm specifically, well, talking so much about the S&P 500 in this video. Before we end this video, I also want to bring up the potential bottom signal, the 3 weeks up pattern on Bitcoin US dollar weekly time frame Coinbase chart. Doesn't matter which exchange you're looking at it, as long as it's a decentralized crypto exchange that's trading 24/7, we're going to be looking at the same pattern. So far throughout this Bitcoin cycle, we've had them 1, 2, 3, 4, and potentially 5 times now. So right here, it pretty much formed the bear market bottom. So you would have entered right here on the 16th of January on the Monday. That's when the weekly candle essentially closes. And after that, we saw an increase of 36%. The second time we actually seen this pattern play out was right here, 16th of October, over until the end of October. 3 weeks up, afterwards we continued up by another 40%. Then the next time this happened was right after the Bitcoin spot ETF launch, where we had this fake out to the upside, the move lower. And then right here, this is our first weekly candle up, second one and the third one. After that, we moved up by an impressive 52, let's call it 53% to the upside. The fourth time it happened this cycle was right here. 3 straight closes to the upside. We had a little bit of a retracement afterwards, but overall we continued higher. This was right before essentially Trump has been elected as the president. and we moved up by 65% to the upside. We can see this numbers increasing through as we're progressing further into this bull market. And now, why I'm bringing this up is because we could be looking at a potential new 3 weeks up pattern here, right here. So we have our first week, our second week, and this could be our third week. We still have to wait until Sunday night, essentially, until this, or at least I have to, until this weekly candle is closing. 4 days and 7 hours to be exact. But if we average this out and like anticipate the closing price right about here and average all this out, we roughly land at a 50% average move to the upside after this 3 weeks up candle pattern has been printed essentially. We could be looking at Bitcoin price targets of above 130,000 US dollars. So let's refer back to this at the end of the week. I'm gonna make sure I ping all the people in the Telegram group. We can also look at examples from last cycle. Last cycle we had the 3 weeks up pattern right here. We had 1, 2, 3, 4 more weeks until we eventually seen the all-time high. Similar story here, 1, 2, 3 candles up. We still moved up by 33%, and here we moved up by 12%. The only time where we really went down after the setup was right here. This was the COVID crash, 3 weeks up, and we continued higher by 48.7%. Another 3 weeks up. Then eventually we only moved up by 7% or something, then we retraced. So this is the only time where we really went lower in the short to mid-term after this candle pattern has been printed. Let's wrap up the video right here. If you have any questions, make sure to join Matt's TA and click this little comments button right here, and then you automatically join Matt's TA chat, where you can have a discussion with me or other community members inside Telegram. If you do have any questions about anything I've talked about in this video. And yeah, appreciate you taking the time to check out my analysis. Make sure to leave a comment behind, like and subscribe. Take care, and until the next video.